he loved Indianapolis, and when he came here for a function, whatever it was, and the last few years I'd do the driving, and he'd say, "Let's go. Hey, let's drive up Pennsylvania and see where everybody lived," and I'd point him out. So and so, and half the PDs lived on that street, and he said, "Wow, hasn't changed much." And driving around Indianapolis, he'd say, "You know what? I can't believe where all the money's coming from." He'd look at pretty houses and say, "Where is all this money coming from? Wow," or "Oh, gee," or "Gosh." As much as his language needed altering, sometimes he'd just say, "Gosh, gee whiz," or "Yeah," or "Holy cow," or, he was two different people. But anyway, he loved Indianapolis. And he loved going to Woodstock because when we were kids in high school, that's where all our parties were. All the dances were at Woodstock, everything, all the weddings, everything. I can't say that he didn't like Indianapolis. He did not like Crown Hill Cemetery, although he thought all of his relatives were there. He just said, "I'm not going to be there. That is one place I will not be," is what he said. But what he liked about Crown Hill was that John Dillinger, our most terrible gangster, was buried in Crown Hill on a hill right near James Whitcomb Riley, the children's poet. And I don't know, now that's the kind of humor, that's just the kind of wit that Kurt was all about. Don't you think that's keen? Another thing he said was, "Don't you think it's keen? John Dillinger next to James Whitcomb Riley."
I knew him in Shortridge, that he was just like the rest of us. You can be like that maybe, if you develop the way he did. He came from a middle-class family, a very fine cultural background, but nothing special. They lost all their money. They weren't rich. He did well in school, although he was not a top student. He got by, and he got into Cornell, and did okay there. But he's a very typical Midwestern youngster growing up. And he had a lot of support from cultural institutions here. He always gives credit to those, the museums and the libraries and so forth. A student could take inspiration from Kurt because he developed it all by himself. He didn't have a father that taught him how to write. He did it himself. And of course, his subject matter is like nobody else's. And the fact that he was always a very genuine person, I would want to emphasize that from our personal point of view. As a friend, he was a real friend. He was not a person that put on airs. So it took a long time for the national public to recognize him. They thought he was just a weirdo writing space stories or whatever they call those things. But finally, the younger generation discovered him. He is the symbol, the icon of our children's generation, my daughter, Cindy, and those people that grew up, went to college during the 60s. What do they call those people? The boomers, yeah. Well, that right after the war, when we insisted on having so many children, and the thing went uphill there. And yeah, he's the icon and symbol of that generation.